Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the match preview with me, Ange Musgrove, and John Gibson as Newcastle travel down to Brighton to hopefully rid themselves of a horrendous record down at the Amex in what is another crucial game in the race for Champions League football for next season. As always, the episode is sponsored by NordVPN. Do hit the link in your podcast description box to get a very special exclusive offer on your plan. Protect yourself and support the podcast. It's well worth your money. John, welcome back to the show. How are you keeping? Are you well?
I'm good, and we're back on track, which is the most important thing, back to the way that we're used with it being, so that's good.
Yeah, it's a funny old world as football, isn't it? I think they often say that 7 days is a long time in the world of football. And from the lows of that Villa defeat when Newcastle were thoroughly beaten to the highs of beating Ipswich, going up to third, you've then praying that Villa get deeply affected, having been knocked out of the semi-finals of the FA Cup, and things just look a lot more rosy. And if you'd given us this kind of platform after that defeat to Villa, we would have taken your hand off.
Yeah, but I mean, to be truthful, we had that platform, didn't we? We talked about it last week. If you wanted to play anybody after that Villa result, it was Ipswich at home. And so it turned out. And it won't be, I'm taking nothing away from it because we have been, I mean, exceptionally consistent, which we tend to forget. You know, we have the drama, don't we? When we lose, we have the drama of oh dear me, we are inconsistent. This has happened. This has not happened. But it was Eddie Howe that pointed it out after the Ipswich game, which is quite staggering, but the facts are true, that we've won 20 of our last 26 games. Now, that is, to me, the definition of consistency. And Liverpool have only won 16 of their last 26, Arsenal 14, and they're the top two teams. So we have been very, very consistent. We hit drama, don't we? When we hit a bump in the road, it's oh dear me, etc., etc. But we knew that Ipswich was going to be Ipswich. I mean, they're not down in the bottom three where they've been virtually all season for no reason. And I mean, I took it to be a 3-0, which is what it was. Although for half an hour it was a struggle, Andrew. For it would turn by the sending off and then the penalty on the stroke of half time. But what we now face is the true test of the running. And I think Newcastle are up for it, and I think they're good enough for it. I don't think they're good enough for it. I know they're good enough for it. But we've got to go out and prove it yet again. But the next four games are tougher than anything Ipswich was.
Indeed, and for you, John, are you kind of sitting there saying brilliant performance against Ipswich, good to score 3 goals, but it was against Ipswich and they are a terrible side. So we've only done what we expected Newcastle United to do and what they should have done if they are an elite side in the Premier League. So there's no reason to kind of get too excited about it because it
No,
was just Ipswich.
no, we shouldn't get euphoric. We should be pleased. We should be reassured. We should think we got what we were expecting. It wasn't just against Ipswich, it was against 10 men. 10 men Ipswich, which, I mean, you can't get euphoric about that. But as we always say, you can only beat what's put in front of you, and they were put in front of us. For the first half hour, mind, Andrew, before the sending off and before we scored, I was sitting there saying, what's the matter? It wasn't a good performance. It was a very lethargic performance. But with steamroll, the second half was a stroll through Leazes Park. And that was great. We've got that out of the way. We've got the Aston Villa result out of the way. Um, and we ought to be cooking on gas again. And we need to be because we've got two tricky away games with Brighton and Arsenal. We've got Chelsea at home, who in Chelsea have, steadied a rocking boat somewhat. They're only winning 1-0 and unconvincingly, but they're winning. And then we've got Everton at our place. So this run in is going to test us. We did it last week, didn't we? Where we talked about where Newcastle will finish, and before the Ipswich game, and I said they would certainly finish in the top five, and therefore they would be in Europe. And you'd already forecast them to get into Europe, and I still believe that to be the case. But we've got to go through it all and really start being convincing and dominant like we can be and like we have been on Sunday. We've got to be at our Sunday best.
Yeah, indeed. And before we talk about that game against Brighton, we are recording this on Wednesday morning, and on Thursday evening, Nottingham Forest take on Brentford at the City ground. Now, Forest are currently down in sixth. If they win that game against Brentford, they will go up to third, a point ahead of Newcastle United. So it is a very, very big game. I'm sure everyone who is watching and listening to this might be also tuning in to that game. I'm guessing it's going to be on Sky. I haven't checked. But what do we see happening there, John? Because I know you might say, well, actually, let's not worry about anyone else. Let's only worry about what we do. But that result is going to be crucial, isn't it?
Oh, of course. I mean, while I say that, it's because it's the only way for the club to approach games because they can't affect the other games. They can only affect their own game. But of course, we look at what are the results are because we're looking desperately for something unexpected to happen, to knock back our rivals. And we'll all be cheering for the Busy Bees on Thursday night because that would be a super step forward. I would expect Forest to win, not necessarily greatly. They're tapering, aren't they? They finished very second best in the FA Cup semi-final, and the results have tapered a bit after a wonderful, wonderful season. It's catching up with them somewhat, but they had this cushion that keeps them in with a shout, and you know they're very much so. They go back third if they win. But if we keep getting results, if we stay unbeaten between now and the end of the season, we will be in the Champions League.
Well,
And
I'm hoping.
that includes a couple of, the possibility of a couple of draws. If we are unbeaten, we'll be in the Champions League.
Oh, without doubt. I'm hoping though Brian and Burmo, maybe who could be playing in black and white next season, might win the hearts of Newcastle United fans and score 2 or 3 on Thursday night against Forest. That would be lovely, wouldn't it? And he would win himself a move to Newcastle United maybe in the process. But back onto Brighton, and it's funny, John, because I think of Brighton as this kind of really good side, good to watch, going for Europe, decent young manager in charge, some really exciting players. And then I looked at their form, and goodness me, they've really been in bad form.
Oh,
Out of the
yes.
last 6 games, they've only won once, and that was against West Ham over the weekend just gone. And that totally went under the radar for me. But of course, Newcastle's record at the Amex is awful, and you have to go back to the Championship season of 2016-17 for the last win there. They've never won in the Premier League at the Amex. So you can pick whichever stat you want to move you in
Yeah.
whatever agenda you want to talk about. But Brighton, are they the side that we maybe paint them as in our heads, or are they a little bit, or are they not as threatening as maybe we think they are?
They're one of these sides, Andrew, in my opinion. They're one of these sides that get a lot of accolades because they're not expected to do much. They're the alleged smaller club and aren't they run brilliantly. They sell players for huge dough and they find unknowns who come through and are the next superstars. And they get huge plaudits. And I'm thinking of Brighton, I'm thinking of Bournemouth, I'm thinking of things. But at the end of the day, where are they? Then they haven't done what Nottingham Forest have done, which is get in the top four and stay there for most of the season. We hear what a wonderful side Brighton are, and we hear what a wonderful side Bournemouth are, but you know what they are? They're wonderful in patches and they don't play under pressure because there isn't the pressure like there is at Newcastle, who are expected to be a top four. They're not playing under pressure. When they play well, they get a result, and everybody says, "Isn't that wonderful?" And then they don't get results. I mean, you're absolutely right. Before they beat West Ham 3-2, with 2 goals in the last 2 minutes, by the way, Andrew, they were 2-1 down. Before they did that, the previous 5 games, they lost 3 and drawn 2. They're in no form whatsoever. And we are in very good form, 20 wins out of 26. Then you look, as you said, our record down there, and it's hopeless. What set of figures do you want to believe? Um, I don't think they're as good as people make them out to be. I think their reputation is slightly overblown, as I think Bournemouth's reputation is slightly overblown.
You could see the relief in their manager when that third goal went in. He was down the touchline like Jose Mourinho. You could see he was very relieved to finally pick up a win. But they are a dangerous side with dangerous players, of course. Minter on the left-hand side is one to watch. They've got Matoma, they've got Danny Welbeck, who is still banging in the goals. They have a lot of talented players, and we've unfortunately come to realise this season as well. They're also going for Europe, John, and they are 9th in the table, joint on points with Fulham. It looks like 8th place will offer some sort of European football. So there's their encouragement to turn up on Sunday and try and get the best of Newcastle.
Sure. I mean, they're trying to get in the European Conference League. We're already in that. We are looking at bigger fish, which is the Champions League. They're not going to, them and Bournemouth. I have a little smile when I read about these are going for Europe. When we think of going for Europe, we think of the Champions League, don't we? They're looking to get 7th or 8th or something and scraping in one of the minor European competitions. Good for them, by the way. I'm not knocking it. Good for them. And by the way, here's another stat. These crazy stats we've been talking about. Here's another one. They're aiming for the 3rd successive win against us this season. They won 1-0 at St James's Park in the league. They won 2-1 up here in the FA Cup. So we have beaten Arsenal 3 times out of 3. We've beaten Nottingham Forest 3 times out of 3. They're going to try to say we've beaten Newcastle 3 times out of 3. So there's another stat that we've got to. Are we jinxed against them, or are they just better than I think they are? Don't get me wrong. At their place, on any given day, they're a right handful. But on another given day, they're just an average side, which you can roll over with determination and application. So it just depends what happens on the day. But we shouldn't fear them.
Yeah, that's right. We shouldn't fear them. And if Newcastle United turn up, then Newcastle United will win that game. But they do seem to have a problem doing Newcastle against sides at home. Sorry, when they're on the road, because they've only won once on the road against the sides in the top 12, which I've double checked this stat and I've treble checked it, and it is correct because we've only beaten Nottingham Forest on the road. We haven't beaten any of the other sides, from Palace, Brentford, Bournemouth. Obviously, you go to Brighton on Sunday, Fulham, Villa, etc., etc. That is a strange stat, isn't it? When you look at it, because I think we spoke about it last week, how we looked at Newcastle's away form and thought they were doing really well, but there just seems to be that little bit of an issue against those top 12 sides. But this weekend is definitely a time to rid themselves of it.
It is because we're doing this topsy-turvy stats thing, brain it to death, aren't we? And it's right, because it's not so long ago when we won 5 away games on the trot. It's not so long ago since we won 3 away games in 9 days at, in no particular order, Manchester United, Spurs and Arsenal. The Arsenal win was in the League Cup, of course. But we did win, and I mean, I think that extended to 5 away games on the run, winning. And yet you say, and you're right again, we've only won 1 on the way against the top 12 side in the league. But when we beat Spurs away and Man United away, look where they are on the table, but they're big scalps. And we did win away at Arsenal, but it was in the League Cup. But I mean, that was a superb win against the top side on where travels. So it's been a topsy-turvy all time in a way. But I think Chelsea's going to be difficult up here because they've emerged. But we've got to try to stay unbeaten at Brighton and at Arsenal. The 2
Yeah,
away games left. That is crucial.
yeah. I mean, we'll do the predictions at the end, but you can probably tell by the reaction on my face there. I'm not looking forward to the game on Sunday, but we have been to stadiums this season where we've had horrendous records. Old Trafford, Tottenham's stadium, and now we can go down to Brighton and we can win. Those kind of horrible records are there to be rewritten, so there's no reason why Newcastle United can't do it this Sunday. And I go back to what I always say: look, if you're going to be a top 4, top 5 side, Champions League side, then these are the games in which you should be winning. Really, as good as Brighton are. Yes, they're going for Europa Conference League, but when push comes to shove, these are the games that at the very least you should not be losing. Let's look, John, at the starting 11 for Newcastle on Sunday. Obviously, we wait and see the full scope of Joelinton's injury, but I don't expect them to be involved on Sunday. The big question is, did Joe Willock for you do enough to keep his spot in this starting 11?
Good question. Joelinton will be more missed at Brighton and in the 4-game run-in than he was against Ipswich. Joelinton's at his best with Tonali and Bruno when we play in transition, when his job is to be the big, immovable object who wins the ball and gets us going on the attack. He is not so impressive when we're pouring forward and it's all going our way. Therefore, he was not going to be missed as much against Ipswich as he will be missed at Brighton and in the other three if he didn't make any of the run in, if the injury is bad enough. And it is a worry because it's his knee, and it's always his knee. I think it's his right one, isn't it? It's always his knee. So that being persistent is a big worry. I was very confident that he wouldn't be missed as much against Ipswich, but down there where we need him, I mean, he showcased everything he's about in the League Cup final, didn't he? That's what he's about, this big guy that'll win the ball, break up the attack of the other side and get us going. That'll be needed down at Brighton. It'll certainly be needed at Arsenal and it'll be needed against Chelsea up here. But so he's going to be more of a miss, and I've got a feeling that, like you, that he won't take part, but we're really going to feel it now. Did Willock do enough? Dear, oh dear, oh dear. That's a great question. I don't think our style now suits him like it suited him 2 years ago when we were going for Europe and he was playing a lot more games and he could get us from back to front quick on that left-hand side when we were trying to break things up higher up the park. But now we're trying to dominate midfield possession. Willock's not so good. I don't think he was clever against Ipswich in particular. I don't think he's had an outstanding game for quite a while. But he is automatically left-sided, although he's right-footed. He likes to play left-sided, and he does play left-sided. I think that Howe would probably go with him. The alternative for me is Miley. I think Longstaff so far back in the ratings now has to be number 6 out of 6 and inevitably going to go in the summer. Whether that's the right thing or the wrong thing, that's up to the manager. But I would think that the only way Willock wouldn't start would be if Miley was put in there. But I've got a feeling Willock would start and Miley would come on.
Yeah, I think he'll be Willock to start. I think Eddie Howe made that pretty obvious after or during his post-match press conference after the Ipswich win. We have to hope that Newcastle can use his best asset really well on Sunday in terms of maybe they'll have a little less of the ball against Brighton and more space to run into, because you've summed it up perfectly there where Willock is best. And it's when he's got the ability to carry the ball into space, and Newcastle move really quickly over the transition. Against Ipswich, that's not going to happen. Against Brighton, they will probably look to have more of the ball at home, whereas Newcastle might be a bit happier just sitting back, just absorbing the pressure and then hitting Brighton on the counter. I do think it'll be a game, of kind of two teams trying to counter-attack each other, with Brighton having slightly more of the ball. So maybe that plays into Joe Willock's hands, but he needs a big performance, I think, just to kind of save his Newcastle United career, really. I don't think he's got too many fans on his side who would say, if someone comes in with 15-20 million in the summer, we best keep Joe Willock. I think a lot of people would say, thank you very much, Joe, but on you go, because you just haven't realised your true potential, unfortunately. So big couple of games coming up for big 4 games coming up for Joe Willock if indeed Joelinton is out injured. Elsewhere, John, are we looking at it unchanged, you would think?
I would think we probably are. You're not going to get any change at the back. You're not going to want any change at the back. The back four is fine. The two fullbacks have been absolutely terrific when they have no right to be. I mean, Trippier's 35 in September. He was supposed to be finished here on the wrong side of the hill when we had Livermento and Hall, and it was a matter of where he went next. He's come in because of Hall's injury and been absolutely magnificent. Livermento's playing on his wrong side. He should find that difficult. No, he doesn't. He's done terrific. So the fullbacks have been great. It's too early to start Botman. He's not ready to start. He'll get a couple of appearances off the bench to sort of bring him back in, and he might start before the season's over. Um, so you're not going to get any changes in the back four. And in the front three, the only change could be Gordon, but who would you drop? You wouldn't drop Bonds at the moment, and you could drop uh, Murphy and play him on the right side. But I think our manager is a very big fan of Murphy, and he has talked about Anthony Gordon having to get up physically to the sort of levels that he once had. And remember, that was the case when he first come to us. He didn't start regularly then because physically he wasn't up to it. And having been out for a while with his 3-match suspension and his England injury, perhaps he's that little bit short. He is not taking it too well, I'm told, being out of the side. But then again, you want that. You don't want a person to be content to be out the side. You want them to be pushing to get back in. So we need that. But I don't see him as getting in the starting side on uh, on Sunday. No.
No, I think it'll remain unchanged actually from the starting 11 that did start against Ipswich. And yes, it's just really nice to be sat here saying, oh, we've got Anthony Gordon back from suspension and injury, but he's not getting back in despite being arguably Newcastle's third or fourth best player because Harvey Barnes is having an absolute storming end to the season. And Jacob Murphy, despite maybe not having the best of kind of performances overall in a game, is still banging in the assists and goals. And that's what you need from your wingers. So I'm all for that element of competition. I feel like, John, Alexander Isak has to have a game in where he just totally dominates the opposition because in recent weeks, although he's still been amongst the goals and assists, he's not looked his old self, whether he's lacking a bit of freshness, a bit of fitness, because he has had to shoulder the main responsibility of all the goals with Newcastle not really having a replacement or a bit of competition for him. I don't know what the reason is, but I feel like he's going to have at least one game in the remaining weeks of the season where he just totally blows the opposition out of the water. And you know what? I feel like it could be this Sunday where everything just comes off. His touch, his speed, his ability to kind of just zigzag in and out of defenders before popping one in the back of the net. I think this Sunday we could see Alexander Isak return to top form and help Newcastle United take a huge step towards Champions League football.
I hope you're right. I desperately hope you're right. He scored 51 goals over the last 2 seasons. He's an immaculate player. I've banged on about him week after week after week in the podcast and in print. In the Chronicle, I rate him so highly, it's untrue. I want him to explode. You know why? Because at the moment, Andrew, I feel uncomfortable watching him. I watch him, and this is harsh to say, and I'm not really suggesting it, but he's almost going through the motions, Andrew. I don't know that he's looking for his form, that he's looking to get explosive again, that it's inevitable it'll come. It'll come if he gets the game by the scruff of the neck and says, I'm going to prove how good I am because I am good. If he does that, he'll explode all right because he's a different class. What bothers me at the moment, he almost looks as though he's going through the motions. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Where's the va-va-va-voom? And that's what he always had. That's what he had. Now, I'm not suggesting anything naughty or anything like that. I'm not suggesting that people are getting in his head. And although those things happen, and they happened, if you remember, with Anthony Gordon in Liverpool a little while back, and Anthony Gordon's body language wasn't good. And then all of a sudden he gets that out his system and gets his head clear. and he's the old England outside left again. Um, it happens with young men. It happens with players. It happens when people are in their ears all the time. His body language isn't the best at the moment. It isn't the best. He looks more as if he's going through the motions than he's coming out and saying, right, this is my piece of grass. I'm going to dominate it. I'm going to do this, that, and the other. Now, it happens. But you see, when centre forwards don't hit form, it's always one of two reasons. It's almost lazy looking at the player. It's always because he hasn't got the service or he's tired because he's done so much work. And it's never that they've just dropped form or some other reason. And it's often another reason. It's not those two things. I'm desperate to see Alex be the player that he is. Um, because we need him to. And he is good. He's better than good. You don't think everybody in the country and in Europe's looking at him because he's hopeless. He scored 51 goals for Newcastle in a season in 3 quarters, for goodness sake. That's how good he is. And if we've nicknamed him Alexander the Great, all I can say is, Alex, prove that nickname's correct once again. You've already proved it. Prove it again. What I want to see you run out the tunnel so flipping quick that you're wondering where everybody else is behind you when you're coming out to start the match. And I want you, when we kick off, to go at them and say, listen, I'm the top dog, not in this match, in this league. And I'm going to prove I am, because that's how good he is. We need a performance like that. We haven't had one recently. And I want him to look explosive. I want him to run as if he's explosive, to chase down things, to not headless chicken, but to look like Vavavoom. That's what he's always had. That's not there now. And why it worries me, it doesn't worry me when it's not there for a game, Andrew, or something like that. But it hasn't been there since Wembley.
Mm.
Yes, he scored 3 goals or whatever. One's a penalty. He hasn't been scoring a pile, but he's been scoring 3. His record's phenomenal, his goals record. I'm looking for the Vavavoom.
Well, hopefully he finds it on Sunday. I just think he's been slightly frustrated, maybe a lack of service. But we saw against Ipswich, he had 2 or 3 chances before he took the penalty.
I
So
was going to say, but we're
hopefully,
saying, Andrew, we're saying a lack of service, my friend. Have you totted up how many chances he's missed in the last 3 games?
no, that is true. I mean, and hopefully
Yes,
he scores a few more with the chances that he will hopefully
he's had
get on
chances,
Sunday.
mate. He's had chances. He just hasn't taken them.
Yeah. Well, look, players go through this dip of form, don't they? And then always, well, don't always, but hopefully Isak will bounce back, starting with, let's say, a little nice brace on Sunday. We'd
He's a
certainly take that.
wonderful, wonderful player. We've never lost faith in him. We absolutely adore him. Go and prove it all over again, mate, and finish the season with some flourish. Because the number of goals, you could actually end up with 30 this season. Just need 4 more. And with your ability, you can get 4 more in 4 games. You can have 30, for goodness sake.
Indeed, he could. Just briefly, John, I don't know if you saw it earlier this week that Rio Ferdinand on his podcast was talking about the destination of Alexander Isak this summer. And rather jokingly, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say he was joking. He included Manchester United in a list of possible destinations alongside Liverpool, Chelsea, and Arsenal.
Yeah,
Your thoughts on that?
He's going to Manchester United because he wants Champions League football. I mean, is Rio kidding? I mean, you can be biased for your club, but I mean, I was biased when Ashley had this club, but I wasn't suggesting that Harry Kane was going to sign for us the next week because it was never going to happen. Um, I'm more concerned about Peter Crouch suggesting that he's going to go to Liverpool and they'll dominate the rest of time as a consequence, because Liverpool's already irritated me with the way they went on about Anthony Gordon, and I don't want them getting into Alexander Isak because we can do without all that. Thank you very much. We've got our own agenda, and quite frankly, I don't see why you have to go anywhere else, either Isak or Tonali or Bruno or anyone else for that matter.
Yeah, let's keep our stars. And Eddie Howe said that after the Ipswich game, they want to keep the big players and build on the squad that they've got. And on Eddie Howe, John, we saw him back in the dugout against Ipswich. Thankfully, he hasn't fully recovered from his illness, but well enough to be back on the job. How important is Eddie Howe's return to Newcastle securing Champions League football?
Massively, without taking anything away from his staff who were brilliant in his absence. You've always got to have your lead. You always want your leader to be out in the front, leading you, doing what his job definition is. I thought he was nowhere near his best, both in terms of his physical ability. He was more restrictive. He wasn't out shouting orders as much at the players and that, because he's feeling a certain weakness. He'll have the strength of another week to come on from that. And we'll need him to do that on Sunday, because the Mad Dog is sitting in the back of the stand, of course, having been booked against Ipswich. And it didn't the Mad Dog, who took on the mantle of a manager and full of decorum for 3 games, suddenly went mad again once his boss was back, didn't he? The man we love re-emerged rather quickly, and he can't be on the touchline at Brighton. So while Graham Jones will probably be, him and Graham Jones will probably swap jobs. He'll sit up in the back of the stand in the first half and look at the thing. And Graham Jones would be down sitting next to the manager, or I would hope so. But yes, we need Eddie to be back at his barking best on Sunday afternoon.
Well, all that remains to be done then, John, is to get your prediction for Sunday. How is it going to go?
Terrific question. Terrific question. I mean, if you go on the stats, you don't know which way. You don't know whether to stick or twist, because there's half a dozen stats you can give which tell you go with Brighton, and half a dozen stats you can give which tell you go with Newcastle. Uh, when you asked me to do my table last week before we did the show and decide where Newcastle and everybody else would finish, I took us for a draw in that, when I was working out that table, for a draw at Brighton and a draw at Arsenal and winning the home games. Um, and I think it's imperative we are unbeaten in the rest of the season, because it's going to be very, very tough and close running. The one thing we don't do, funny enough, in recent times, is draw. We've won 20 of the last 26, and when we don't win, we lose. We don't do draws anymore. So on the law of averages, I'm going for a draw. I could easily see us winning. I don't contemplate for 1 second us losing. I don't even contemplate that, because I don't wish to. I think it'll be a draw, and I'm going 1-1.
I think a point would be an excellent result, just because of Newcastle's history down there. Whatever it is, they just do not like visiting the Amex. I know I talked about Alexander Isak there and having his moment this Sunday. If that comes off, then Newcastle United win. But I am sitting here feeling rather uncomfortable about it. Just their luck on the road against the top 12 sides as well. And I don't know, I'm without Joelinton. I'm struggling really to predict anything more than a point, but also my actual head says Newcastle are going to lose this game, and it kills me to do it. I still think they'll qualify for the Champions League, so don't worry about that. But I can see them unfortunately losing against Brighton on Sunday. I don't know. There's just something in my gut tells me that. Usually, when it tells me that, it proves to be wrong. So there's a bit of
That's what
positivity,
I'm
John.
hoping for, my friend. That's what I'm hoping for. So you will take my 1-1 and
Oh,
say, I'll take that now.
yeah. I mean, just on Newcastle's position. So let's say, well, it's irrelevant of what the Forest score is really. They'll still have a couple of sides, 3 sides below them. How do you think Newcastle United will handle being hunted rather than the hunters?
I think at this stage it doesn't matter what you are. You get the blinkers on and you say, right, what's the result against Brighton? What's the result? If we draw against Brighton, and that was my forecast when we did the table. And remember, when I did my table, we did make the Champions League, so a draw fits in with that. You know what becomes massive then? Beating Chelsea, because that could be a banana skin if we don't look at it right. They're not the touch they were 5 or 6 weeks ago, Chelsea. They're very unattractive. They don't play well, but they sneak win, they sneak win, they sneak win, even with Cole Palmer not doing anything whatsoever. If we only draw, and that's a wonderful thing to say, only draw, because we both think it'll be a good result at Brighton, but they could win at Brighton. If we draw, we must beat Chelsea to keep within that sphere of making the Champions League. We must beat Chelsea, no ifs or buts, and that will become a huge match. But I think you put the blinkers on and you just look at your own. I think if we take the attitude that we are going to remain unbeaten in the next 4 games, because I think we would look for 2 home wins and 2 away draws, then we'll make Europe. And sorry, we're in Europe anyway. Then we make the Champions League. And I think we've got to be one-eyed like that and not worry. Although of course we'll look for the result afterwards, but not worry about what Forest in Brentford do, what the other teams do during the run-in. You can chew yourself into a not looking at everyone else and trying to work out what's what. Let us take care of business. And if we take care of business, we will have. And by the way, when we make the Champions League, I'll consider that a double this season. That and the League Cup, because the Champions League is some prize. You mightn't get a silver pot for making it, but you get a pot of gold. You don't get a silver pot, you get a pot of gold. And if we get a silver pot, the Carabao Cup, and a pot of gold, that'll do for me. That'll be some double.
It'll do for everyone watching and listening, I think. And I'm going to back them to do it, as you guys well know. Thank you to John, as always, for providing the match preview. We'll be back next week. Thank you to you guys watching and listening. Thank you to NordVPN for sponsoring this episode. Head over to chroniclelive.co.uk for all the latest Newcastle United news. And I will see you guys very soon.